Bethany Green's fingers flew across the keyboard, racing against the ticking clock on her laptop screen that read 11:58 p.m. Just 2 minutes left before the midnight deadline. Her environmental conservation presentation for Verdant Solutions had consumed her entire weekend, and she wasn't about to miss this opportunity to impress her boss. With eyes burning from exhaustion, she finished the final slide, saved the document, and hurriedly typed an email to her supervisor. Attached is my presentation for tomorrow's meeting with potential investors. I've added comprehensive data on sustainability practices and projected outcomes as requested, she wrote, stifling a yawn as she hit the attach button and scrolled through her contacts. In her foggy, sleep-deprived state, she selected Richard Morgan and pressed send, immediately feeling the wave of relief wash over her, until she realized her mistake. Her bloodshot eyes widened in horror as she noticed she hadn't sent the presentation to her boss, Richard Morgan, but to someone named Quinn Reynolds, a complete stranger. Bethany frantically clicked back through her emails, trying to figure out how this Quinn person had even ended up in her contacts. Then she remembered the environmental conference 3 months ago where attendees had shared contact information. She must have accidentally added his email to her work contacts. No, she whispered, her face burning with embarrassment. It was too late to recall the email. Her career-defining presentation had just been sent to some random person at midnight. She quickly typed an apology email, explaining her mistake and politely asking this Quinn Reynolds to disregard her previous message. As she finally crawled into bed, she tried to reassure herself that it wasn't the end of the world, just an embarrassing mistake. The stranger would probably delete it without a second thought. Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the skyline, Quinn Reynolds was still working despite the late hour. As the founder and CEO of Reynolds Sustainable Investments, his schedule rarely accommodated a full night's sleep. At 34, he had built his fortune by identifying promising environmental startups and turning them into industry leaders. His phone chimed with a new email notification. Ordinarily, he wouldn't check work correspondence at this hour, but something about the unprofessional timing intrigued him. He opened the email from an unfamiliar name, Bethany Green, and found himself looking at a presentation titled Revolutionizing Urban Waste Management, the Green Tomorrow Initiative. Quinn raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. He opened the attachment and began scrolling through the slides. By the third page, he was fully engaged, impressed by the innovative approach to urban waste management. The presentation outlined a system that could potentially reduce landfill contributions by 65% while creating renewable energy sources. The financial projections were conservative but promising, exactly the kind of realistic approach he appreciated. As he reached the end of the presentation, another email from the same sender appeared, this one frantically apologizing for the misdirected message. Quinn smiled, finding the honest mistake refreshingly human compared to the perfectly orchestrated pitches he usually received. Instead of deleting the presentation as requested, he decided to reply. "Miss Green," he typed, "no need for apologies. Your presentation is actually quite impressive. The waste management solution you've outlined aligns perfectly with projects my company is currently exploring. I'd be interested in discussing this further if you're open to it. Quinn Reynolds, Reynolds Sustainable Investments." He hesitated before pressing send, realizing it might seem strange to respond at nearly 1 a.m., but decided that since she was obviously awake, it wouldn't be inappropriate. He hit send, not expecting a reply until the next day. Bethany's phone buzzed just as she was drifting off to sleep. She groaned, tempted to ignore it, but professional anxiety won out. She grabbed her phone and squinted at the bright screen, reading Quinn Reynolds' response with growing disbelief. Reynolds Sustainable Investments. She scrambled to sit up, suddenly wide awake, and typed Quinn Reynolds into her search engine. The results made her gasp. Quinn Reynolds wasn't just anyone, he was a self-made millionaire who had revolutionized green investment strategies, featured in Forbes' 40 Under 40 last year. And she had accidentally sent him her presentation. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertain how to respond. This could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity or a strange joke from the universe. Finally, she crafted a reply. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm beyond surprised and honored by your interest. This proposal is actually for my current employer, but I'd be happy to discuss the concepts and methodologies with you. Thank you for seeing potential where I only saw an embarrassing mistake. Bethany Green." She sent it before she could second-guess herself, then flopped back onto her pillows, heart racing. There was no way she'd sleep now. The morning brought reality crashing back. Bethany had to present to her own company in 3 hours, and now she had the added stress of knowing her work had caught the attention of a millionaire investor. She arrived at Verdant Solutions early, polished and prepared, trying to maintain her composure. The presentation went well, but her boss seemed only moderately impressed, suggesting several improvements that Bethany knew would actually weaken the proposal. As the meeting concluded, she checked her phone and found another email from Quinn Reynolds, requesting a coffee meeting that afternoon to discuss her ideas. "I can't just meet with a competitor," she whispered to herself in the bathroom, pacing back and forth. But was it really a competitor? Reynolds invested in companies. He didn't directly compete with Verdant, and if her own company wasn't going to recognize the value of her work. 3 hours later, Bethany found herself sitting in an upscale cafe, nervously adjusting her blazer as she waited. She'd told her office she had a dentist appointment, a white lie that made her uncomfortable but seemed necessary. She recognized Quinn Reynolds immediately when he walked in his confident stride and tailored suit, would have marked him as successful even if she hadn't researched him extensively that morning. "Miss Green," he said, extending his hand with a warm smile that softened his otherwise imposing presence. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice. Please call me Bethany," she replied, surprised by the firmness of her voice despite her nerves. Quinn ordered an Americano and took a seat across from her. Up close, she noticed his eyes were an unusual shade of gray-blue, observant and direct. "So, tell me about your presentation, the parts that didn't make it into the slides." For the next hour, Bethany found herself explaining her vision for urban waste management with a passion she rarely got to express at work. Quinn asked insightful questions, challenged her assumptions in ways that made her think deeper, and occasionally nodded with approval at her responses. "The truth is," she admitted finally, "most of these ideas get watered down at my company. They prefer safer, more conventional approaches." "That's the problem with established corporations," Quinn replied, leaning forward. "They're so afraid of risk that they miss opportunities for true innovation. That's why I started my own fund to back ideas that others are too cautious to touch." Their conversation flowed easily from professional to slightly more personal. She learned he had built his fortune after starting with just one successful investment in a solar energy startup 8 years ago. He discovered she had a master's in environmental engineering, but had taken a less technical role to get her foot in the door at Verdant. As they were preparing to leave, Quinn handed her his business card. "I have a proposition for you, but I'd like you to think about it first. Call me when you're ready." "What kind of proposition?" Bethany asked, both intrigued and wary. "I'd like you to consider bringing your waste management initiative to my company instead. As a project lead, not just an employee." Bethany blinked in surprise. "But you barely know me or my work." "I know enough," Quinn said with a confidence that both intimidated and attracted her. "Sometimes the best opportunities come from unexpected places like a misdirected email at midnight." For the next week, Bethany found herself distracted at work, constantly thinking about Quinn's offer. She'd researched his company extensively and found that Reynolds Sustainable Investments had an impressive track record of successful environmental ventures. The opportunity was tempting, but she had loyalty to Verdant despite their conservative approach. Her decision became clearer when her boss informed her that they would be shelving her waste management initiative in favor of a safer project with more immediate returns. That evening, she called Quinn. "I'd like to hear more about that proposition," she said when he answered. 2 days later, they met at Quinn's office, a sleek, modern space with large windows and living green walls that immediately made Bethany feel at home. He outlined his offer: a position as project director with the resources to build a team and develop her waste management system as a standalone venture under his company's umbrella. "Why are you willing to take such a chance on me?" she asked, still unable to believe the opportunity before her. "Because your midnight email showed me something rare, genuine innovation paired with practical application," Quinn replied. "And our coffee meeting confirmed my instinct that you have both the vision and determination to make it succeed." Bethany took a deep breath and accepted his offer. 2 weeks later, after giving notice at Verdant, she began her new position. The transition wasn't easy. She had to build a team from scratch, justify her budget to Quinn's board of directors, and refine her initial concepts into an actionable business plan. But Quinn proved to be both a demanding boss and a supportive mentor, pushing her to excel while providing the resources she needed. Their professional relationship developed a rhythm. Weekly progress meetings often extended into dinners where they discussed challenges and brainstormed solutions. Bethany found herself looking forward to these evenings, appreciating Quinn's sharp mind and unexpected sense of humor. For his part, Quinn seemed to enjoy her fresh perspective and willingness to challenge his assumptions. 3 months into the project, they were working late at the office, surrounded by prototype designs and financial projections. "The municipal contract is almost within reach," Bethany said, stretching her arms above her head to relieve the tension. "But we still need to convince the city council that our system is more cost-effective long-term than their current provider." Quinn looked up from the spreadsheet he was reviewing, his expression thoughtful. "What if we offer a scaled implementation? Start with one district as a proof of concept with guaranteed benchmarks before expanding." "That could work," Bethany agreed, making notes. "Lower initial commitment, measurable outcomes." She trailed off, noticing Quinn was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing," he said, then seemed to reconsider. "Actually, I was just thinking how remarkable it is that a mistaken email has led to all this." He gestured to the office around them, to the project that was quickly becoming a reality. Bethany smiled. "Sometimes mistakes turn out to be the best decisions we never meant to make." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the atmosphere between them. For the first time, Bethany clearly recognized the attraction she'd been trying to ignore. Quinn was not only her boss, but also someone whose professional respect she valued above all else. Complicating that with personal feelings seemed dangerous. Quinn seemed to sense her internal conflict. He cleared his throat and returned to the spreadsheets, the moment passing but leaving a lingering awareness in its wake. The next morning, Bethany received an unexpected email from Quinn. "Project celebration dinner tonight. We just secured the preliminary approval from the City Council's Environmental Committee." She stared at her screen, heart racing unexpectedly. Was this a professional dinner or something more? She typed and deleted several responses before settling on a simple, "That's wonderful news." "Dinner sounds perfect. Where and when?" The restaurant Quinn chose was upscale but intimate, with soft lighting and private tables that encouraged conversation. As they were seated, Bethany noticed he seemed different, slightly nervous, less composed than his usual confident self. "Is everything okay?" she asked after they'd ordered. Quinn took a sip of water, his expression becoming more resolute. "Bethany, I need to be straightforward about something." Her stomach tightened. "Is there a problem with the project?" "No, nothing like that," he assured her quickly. "It's about our working relationship." "Oh," She felt a flush creeping up her neck. Have I overstepped somewhere? The opposite, actually. Quinn met her gaze directly. I find myself in an unexpected position. I've developed feelings for you that go beyond professional admiration, and it's beginning to affect my ability to maintain appropriate boundaries. Bethany's breath caught. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, this wasn't one of them. I understand this creates a complicated situation, he continued when she didn't immediately respond. If you don't share these feelings, I completely respect that and promise it won't affect your position or the project, but I felt I needed to be honest. Bethany took a moment to gather her thoughts. Quinn, I'd be lying if I said I haven't felt something too, but I've worked so hard to be taken seriously professionally. I don't want to be seen as someone who got where she is because of a personal relationship with the boss. Quinn nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's a valid concern, and exactly why I wanted to address this directly rather than let it remain unspoken between us. So what are you suggesting? She asked. I'm suggesting we acknowledge what's happening and decide together how to proceed, Quinn replied. Whether that means maintaining strictly professional boundaries or exploring these feelings while implementing safeguards to ensure your work stands on its own merit. The conversation that followed was one of the most honest Bethany had ever experienced. They discussed their concerns, established boundaries, and ultimately agreed to proceed cautiously, keeping their personal relationship entirely separate from work and ensuring that all professional decisions regarding Bethany's project went through proper channels beyond just Quinn. Over the next few months, their relationship developed alongside the waste management initiative. They were careful to maintain professionalism at work, but evenings and weekends became time for them to discover each other beyond their shared passion for environmental innovation. Bethany learned that, despite Quinn's wealth, he lived relatively modestly, his main indulgences being travel and supporting various environmental causes. Quinn discovered Bethany's love of classic literature and her dream of someday creating a completely self-sustainable home. As the pilot program for their waste management system launched successfully in one district of the city, their personal relationship deepened as well. Bethany introduced Quinn to her parents during a weekend visit, nervous about how they would react to her dating her boss, especially one with such financial success. Mom and Dad might be a little intimidated, she warned him as they drove to her childhood home. They're very down-to-earth people. Quinn reached over to squeeze her hand. I'm not meeting them as your boss or as a millionaire. I'm meeting them as someone who cares deeply about their daughter. To Bethany's relief, the visit went better than expected. Quinn charmed her parents with his genuine interest in her father's carpentry hobby and thoughtful questions about her mother's community garden initiative. By the end of the evening, her father pulled her aside. He might have money, Bethy, but he looks at you like you're the real treasure, he said quietly. That's what matters. 6 months into their relationship, the waste management project had expanded to 3 city districts and was garnering national attention. Bethany's team had grown to 15 people, and she had developed into a respected leader in her own right, often presenting at conferences without Quinn's presence to ensure her work stood on its own merits. One evening, after a particularly successful investor meeting, Quinn invited Bethany to dinner at the same cafe where they'd had their first meeting. For old time's sake, he explained with a smile that suggested he had something specific in mind. As they sat at the same table where their journey had begun, Bethany couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. It's hard to believe all this started because I was too tired to check an email address properly. Best mistake anyone's ever made as far as I'm concerned, Quinn replied, his expression growing more serious. Bethany, these past months have been the most fulfilling of my life, both professionally and personally. She smiled, reaching across the table to take his hand. For me too. I've been thinking a lot about our future, he continued, his voice taking on a quality she hadn't heard before, slightly uncertain, which was unusual for him. "About what I want and what matters most." Bethany's heart began to race as she sensed the conversation's direction. "Before you, success to me was measured in investments and returns," Quinn said, his thumb gently stroking her palm. "Now I understand there are more important metrics." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small box, causing Bethany's breath to catch. "I'm not asking because of the project's success, or because it seems like the next logical step," he said, opening the box to reveal a ring with a simple but stunning emerald surrounded by small diamonds. "I'm asking because sending an email to the wrong person turned out to be the most fortunate mistake of my life. Bethany Green, will you marry me?" Tears welled in Bethany's eyes as emotion overwhelmed her. "Yes," she whispered, then more confidently, "Yes, I will." Quinn slipped the ring onto her finger, its emerald reflecting their shared commitment to the environment that had brought them together. "I chose an emerald because it reminded me of your passion for our planet," he explained. "And because green is in your name." Bethany laughed through her tears. "It's perfect." A year later, they were married in a sustainable ceremony that showcased many of the environmental innovations their companies had developed. The waste management initiative had expanded to the entire city and was being implemented in 3 other major urban centers across the country. As they celebrated their first anniversary, Quinn surprised Bethany with the deed to a piece of land outside the city. "For your self-sustainable home dream," he explained as they stood on the property, looking over the gently rolling hills. "I thought we could build it together." Bethany wrapped her arms around him, overcome with emotion. "Sometimes I still can't believe that mistyping an email address changed my entire life." Quinn kissed her forehead gently. "It wasn't just the email, Bethany. It was your brilliance, your dedication, your heart. The email just gave me the chance to discover all of that. Still, I should probably send a thank you note to whatever cosmic force led me to click on your name instead of Richard's," she said with a laugh. "Or maybe just be grateful that you were too tired to double-check your contacts," Quinn suggested, pulling her closer. As the sun set over their future home, Bethany reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a midnight email mistake to building a life together based on shared values, mutual respect, and a love that had grown from the most unexpected of beginnings. 2 years later, their sustainable home was complete, featuring many of the innovations their companies had pioneered. Built with recycled and sustainable materials, powered by renewable energy, and incorporating the very waste management system that had brought them together, it stood as a testament to their shared vision. As they settled into their new home, their family grew with the arrival of their daughter, Lily. Balancing parenthood with their professional responsibilities brought new challenges, but they navigated them together, each supporting the other's goals while creating a loving environment for their child. The waste management initiative continued to expand, now implemented in cities across 3 continents. Bethany had become a respected figure in environmental innovation, often speaking at international conferences, while Quinn had expanded his investment portfolio to include more diverse sustainability projects. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I double-checked that email address?" Bethany asked one evening as they sat on their porch, watching Lily play in the garden they had planted together. Quinn smiled, taking her hand in his. "Sometimes, but I like to think we would have found each other anyway. Some connections are just meant to be." Bethany leaned against his shoulder, content in the knowledge that the biggest mistake of her career had turned into the greatest blessing of her life. "I used to be so careful about everything, triple-checking every detail. Now I understand that some of the best things happen when we leave room for the unexpected." "To beautiful mistakes," Quinn said, raising his glass in a toast. "And to the love they can bring," Bethany replied, clinking her glass against his as the sun set on the life they had built together, a life that began with a single misdirected email.